Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And he went and asked for help. How many times? And they never helped him.
3 hospital visits in 24 hours before dying in the bathroom. Why his widow says he was discriminated against. Also,
I have a date booked for November 26th.
CBC backlog. Why it could take 6 months to get a road test. And where BC is deferring the logging of old-growth trees.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A widow is speaking out tonight after the death of her husband in a bathroom at the hospital in Quesnel. She says he was suicidal and it was his 3rd visit there in 24 hours looking for help, but he never got it. Susana De Silva has our top story tonight and a warning. Some of this may be hard to hear.
There was more pain and more hurt in him and more hopelessness.
That was what Rocky Whitford got after reaching out for help, according to his wife, left to raise their 4-year-old son alone.
He had the most amazing heart. He just loved everybody and cared for everybody.
But in April, Kelly Burgess says her husband became withdrawn, unmotivated. Then on May 12th, during a visit to Quesnel to see her family, Whitford asked to go to the hospital. And she says he asked the nurse and the doctor he saw for one thing, a locked room where he could be safe.
She said, well, I don't really want to put you there. It's literally just a padded room with a mattress on the floor. It's not a nice room. And Rocky says, yes, that's where I want to be.
After assurances he would be placed there, Whitford was calm and told his wife to take their son home. But she says after waiting hours to be moved, frustrated, he left the hospital. A doctor called her to say they called police, worried for his safety. Whitford called her later that morning and went back to the hospital. But she says a couple of hours later, he was sent home.
He was sitting outside and he told me that he's not coming with us. That it's done, it's over. Tried to convince him to come with us and that we loved him.
But he left on foot. That evening, she received a call to go to the police station, and that is when she learned he had taken his life inside a hospital bathroom during his 3rd visit in less than 24 hours looking for help.
And he went and asked for help. How many times? And they never helped him.
The coroner's service is investigating, and the Northern Health Authority said in a statement, anytime there is an unexpected death in a healthcare facility, we do a review of the circumstances. From the review, we can see if there is anything we can learn for the future. Experts say a supportive response is crucial for someone in crisis.
Even if the help is not immediately available, some support and some reassurance that they're on the right path can be enough to help people feel like, okay, I can wait this out a little bit longer.
Whitford's family also worries whether Indigenous racism played a role in his care.
I totally do believe it. And that is a shame, because racism shouldn't always be playing a part in anything when you want some help.
Burgess plans on filing an official complaint.
Just want at least one person's life to be saved or one family's life to be changed.
Susana De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, some good news tonight for people hoping to travel. The federal government plans to gradually lift border restrictions starting early next month. That means fully vaccinated Canadians flying back into the country will be able to skip the mandatory hotel quarantine.
What is currently being considered as the first step in this approach is to allow fully vaccinated individuals currently permitted to enter Canada to do so without the requirement to stay in government-authorized accommodations.
Travelers will have to be fully vaccinated at least 2 weeks prior to arrival with one of the 4 vaccines approved by Health Canada. They'll also still be required to have a negative COVID-19 PCR test before departure, get tested again upon arrival, and they'll have to have a quarantine plan until the test comes back negative. The health minister says the new rules should take effect by early July. And BC is reporting 3 more COVID-19 deaths and 148 new cases today as the rolling average of cases is steadily declining. A record high 44,000 second doses of the vaccine were administered yesterday in the province. 195 people are in hospital, including 47 in intensive care. That's the lowest number since mid-November. And anyone in BC trying to get their full driver's license these days is looking at a 6-month wait in some cases. ICBC is dealing with a backlog of road test appointments as Eva Yuguensenj reports one aspiring driver had to quit his job because he can't get his license soon enough.
If you only have your L license right now, you may be stuck with it for a while.
I have a date booked for November 26th, which is pretty far away.
That's because demand right now is higher than ever, with a road test backlog of 50,000 people.
Compared to 2019, which would be our last non-pandemic year, we've done 45% more Class 7 learners knowledge tests and 36% more Class 5 and 7 road tests than we did compared to 2019.
Those with a learner's permit aren't allowed to drive without a fully licensed passenger who is at least 25 years old, which can make regular practice a challenge.
I'm pretty ready right now, so the fact that my test is booked so far away, especially, I mean, there might be even snow on the ground by the time I get my test, so I'm a little nervous about that. I mean, all I can really do is just practice and keep studying.
Examiners are working overtime to catch up.
We've hired 80 additional new driver examiners here in BC, and we are constantly recruiting and training more driver examiners.
But driving schools say delays lead to fewer prepared test takers.
They do the classroom, they do all the driving lessons, and then they're told they have to wait 4 months for a road test. Or they might do something silly on the road test, maybe nerves played a role and don't pass the first time, and they're waiting another 4 to 6 months, which is just too much.
One solution, some say, let driving instructors administer road tests.
It would help alleviate the backlog. It would help alleviate having ICBC having to hire more instructors or examiners.
In the meantime, it's really just a waiting game or hope for others to cancel. Eva Yuguensenj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Interior Health's chief medical health officer has been put on leave after charges of sex assault and interference against a child. BC Health Minister Adrian Dix is reassuring people in the area the case will not distract their efforts to combat COVID-19.
Is that our efforts to get them protected, to get them vaccinated, and to support those who test positive for COVID-19 in the community or in care continues. And our efforts will continue to be at the highest possible level.
Albert de Villiers spent the night in custody in Kelowna before being released on bail this morning. He's charged with committing sexual offenses against a minor. The alleged incident took place in Grand Prairie, Alberta between the years of 2018 and 2020. Starting Monday, Dr. Sue Pollock will take over as Interior Health's interim chief medical officer. And BC is honoring a request from 3 First Nations to defer the logging of old-growth trees in 2 areas of Vancouver Island. It'll be stopped there for 2 years. Our Tanya Fletcher joins us with the latest developments. Tanya, exactly which areas are we talking about here?
Yes, all old growth in the Fairy Creek watershed and the central Walbran area will be protected. That spans roughly 2,000 hectares. Let's take a look. So in Fairy Creek specifically, look at the right side of your screen. You can see all logging in Zone A will be suspended. In Zone B, old growth logging will be paused, but second growth logging will be able to continue. And then you can see on the left of your screen, that outlines the protected area of the central Walbran Valley. Now, this comes just days after the 3 First Nations issued a joint declaration saying old growth logging should be deferred for 2 years while they develop their own forestry management plans. Premier John Horgan says the job impacts in this case are expected to be modest.
But over time, there will be costs to moving in this direction. But those are going to be dollars well spent to ensure that we can distribute tenures in a more effective way to get more jobs out of the land base, to make sure that we're focusing on adding more value.
Now, because these deferrals are only for 2 years, the company, in this case Teal Jones, will not be compensated for now, but permanent moratoriums would be subject to compensation.
Okay, so this falls on the backdrop of the ongoing clashes as activists continue to protest. So what's the reaction to today's news?
Yeah, the deferral sites include the areas of southern Vancouver Island that have been the center of the conflict. And police have arrested now nearly 200 activists for violating that court injunction, which bans them from blocking operations. Environmentalists say these logging deferrals are not enough to turn down the overall temperature on old growth.
Roughly 2,000 hectares of deferred old growth logging. That's equivalent to about 5 Stanley Parks across a landscape of hundreds of thousands of hectares. Even all the areas that's behind blockades right now, most of those are still open to logging.
Meanwhile, the BC Greens called the deferrals a first step, but, quote, while the NDP are celebrating this long overdue step, it's important to recognize that they are ignoring other First Nations across BC who have been calling for deferrals and protection of old growth in their territories, in some cases for years. So overall, don't expect today's announcement to quiet the critics altogether. Anita?
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Johanna Wagstaffe here with the forecast now. Okay, Joe, yesterday you told us about how dry of a spring it's been, but I understand that's starting to have an impact on the Okanagan. What's happening there?
That's right. Agriculture Canada expanding the drought rating for much of the interior. I want to show you the latest drought conditions across southern BC, and you can see that small brown area. That's between Kelowna and Vernon. That has now been upgraded to severe drought conditions. That's a level 2 on the 0 to 5 drought scale. Meanwhile, moderate drought conditions have spread all the way through the interior in that lighter brown and yellow. And even for the lower mainland, we are now experiencing drought conditions because of how dry this spring has been. So let's keep that in mind as I get you through a soggy forecast. Those details coming up, Anita.
Okay, we know it's needed. Thanks, Joe. Indigenous children make up the largest client group for foster care. Critics are comparing it to residential schools when it comes to cutting kids off from family and culture. Briar Stewart spoke with people who want to change that.
Troy Bird has spent most of his life in foster care, aging out at 21.
I feel like I've lost a lot of foster kids, including myself, have lost that connection to their traditional side.
He said his own experience wasn't bad, but what does disturb him, the overwhelming number of Indigenous children in care.
It's sad when you look at all the Indigenous youth being taken away from families and being put into homes before, the parents are given a chance to work to keep the children.
In Canada, just over 7% of all children are Indigenous, but they make up more than 52% of kids in care. In Manitoba, the rate is even higher, about 90%.
There's a huge power differential between...
Raji Mangit is with the BC legal organization that has been researching the province's care system.
It's sort of like apprehend now, ask questions later, and that kind of manifests itself in not maybe going as far as you could go in thinking about how to support and keep the family together.
Last year, the federal government implemented new legislation that lets First Nations take over jurisdiction of providing care. $500 million over 5 years was promised, but some don't know how far that funding will go.
When you divide that up between all the child welfare agencies in Canada and the overwhelming kind of need that is there, I'm not sure how much of that is going to trickle down.
Now I'm a part of what they call the millennial scoop. It just hasn't stopped.
Shane Oskey, who spent years in care, says there needs to be more physical and financial support.
Just housing subsidies, because BC housing is so overrun, and how is a person supposed to create stability for their child in order for them to feel permanency if they have to keep moving because of the cost of rent?
With extra support, she says, families might be able to stay together in the first place. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
During the NHL playoffs on CBC, just a reminder of how and where you can watch this show. We'll be on every weekday at 6 p.m. online, streaming on CBC Gem, YouTube, and Facebook. After that, we will air on TV after the hockey game each evening. Those times will vary on when the game starts and when it ends. You can always watch our show on demand, streaming at our website, cbc.ca/BC. A legal settlement for those who attended Indian residential schools, including the notorious Kamloops Residential School. Reaction next. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Residents at long-term care homes have been cooped up for months during this pandemic, but now folks at a care home in Halifax get to go out for a spin and enjoy the fresh air. Colleen Jones caught up with them to see what it's all about.
Well, I'm off to Northwood for some sort of cycling story. Can't wait to see what this is all about. Cycling at Northwood. Here we are. Is this your first time?
Yeah. Meet Lynn Island and Madeline Shea. Neither have ridden a bike in decades. Okay, for Madeline, maybe it was a half century ago, and she promptly quit.
First time I went right over the top of it.
All right, but this new rig is different. The shiny new red bike with battery assist is called a trishaw, part tricycle, part rickshaw. This is a big day. It's called Cycling Without Age. It's a Danish design and program that's now global. It's a way to keep people on bikes. Peter Zimmer is with Halifax Cycling Coalition. He's also the bike pilot today.
Require people to commit at least 8 or 10 hours learning it, practicing it, watching videos, reading documents, and then learning the ins and outs of these bikes, because they are nothing like your regular two-wheeler.
And they are off. With a wave goodbye, they're leaving Northwood for a ride to the Hydrostone and some ice cream. Sure, they could have taken a bus, but Janet Sims says this experience...
The ability to stop the bike, to look at a puppy, children in a playground, to feel the breeze, the sunshine, see the plants, interact with the community, it's just so different.
As they make their way through the pothole streets of the North End, they eventually make it to their destination, the Lemonade General Store. This experience, given how long Northwood and all senior homes were locked down, is pure joy.
Enjoyed this experience so much. I think it's a great time to be with friends and getting out in the air.
So good?
After they finish their double scoop and sneak a little from each other's bowls, this is a day they'll treasure.
I figured the only time that I'd be out in the fresh air again would be at my funeral. And
you'd hardly get a decent lungful then.
No, I would not.
It's just beautiful. It's just friggin' beautiful.
Yeah.
Northwood has 2 of these bikes. They hope to bring the joy of cycling back to people who can no longer ride themselves. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
A group of residential school survivors and their descendants have reached a settlement in a class action lawsuit against Ottawa. The group represents day scholars, Indigenous children who attended the schools but who went home at the end of the day. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has the details.
They shared the same playgrounds, classrooms, and within these walls, even abuse.
It was dark days.
But because they went home at night, day scholars were excluded from the 2006 residential school settlement. Now, 15 years later, their experience is being acknowledged.
Personally, I'm glad we're at this point where the government is finally hearing us.
The settlement would provide $10,000 for each eligible day scholar and $50 million in a special fund to promote cultural reclamation for the survivors and their children. It's estimated as many as 20,000 day scholars could be compensated.
It's my sincere hope
that this will unlock a healing process.
But Ottawa is still battling another part of this claim, one involving 105 First Nations. They're seeking reparations for loss of culture and language caused by residential schools. The federal government says there's no basis in law to seek damages for those claims and denies it has any legal liability.
They're on the wrong side of Canadians, and it is a real stain on what the promises of reconciliation.
The government is also involved in litigation with another group of residential school survivors.
It's just so unfair. Like, we've already been traumatized as children by our own government.
Those who attended the former St. Anne's residential school are fighting for documents, records they believe detail suffering, to reopen their compensation cases.
Have we not been through enough?
The government says it worries the St. Anne's case could undermine the residential school settlement, but Bennett says she's open to a meeting with complainants, which they proposed. That brings some hope of negotiation after a nearly 30-year battle. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Police in London, Ontario continue to investigate the killing of 4 family members of a Muslim family. They haven't been shy about the motive, but as Mukta Gabrisalasa explains, the evidence of the suspect's anti-Muslim hatred was seemingly gathered in the course of his arrest.
This mountain of flowers has come to symbolize a community's grief, but this woman keeps thinking about a more haunting image.
I could see the boy lying on this side on the grass crying.
Karen didn't want her last name shared. She says she and her husband came upon the horrible scene just after it happened. Yamna Afzal, Medea Salman, Talit Afzal, and Salman Afzal were killed that day. 9-year-old Fayez survived.
And all he could say, it's my family, and he's crying, mommy, 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 mommy. And that's hard to take, especially when you have a little 6-year-old at home.
Police say Nathaniel Veltman targeted the family with his truck and believe he was motivated by hate.
The laying of a terrorism charge is certainly on our radar, and it has been since day one.
The police chief says the accused has no known ties to hate groups at this time, but that what happened during his arrest in this mall parking lot was crucial.
It was a culmination of speaking with witnesses and looking at video, and we eventually arrested the accused, and from that we made the determination this was hate motivated.
The chief says hate-related incidents have been on the rise. An update on how many is expected soon, but members of the community say action can't wait.
This is a responsibility of every single person,
including the highest elected officials, says this Muslim faith leader.
If you hear any form of hatred, any form of racism, any form of discrimination, you stop it. You call it out.
For now, the accused has been charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. He has another court appearance scheduled for tomorrow. Mukta Gabrisalasa, CBC News, London, Ontario.
An early morning funnel cloud spotted in the Georgia Strait near Comox had islanders talking today. Why conditions are ripe for the pseudo-tornadoes. Next.
National with Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. A disaster in the making tonight in British Columbia's interior. Rain and lots of it has been pounding the region for almost a month. It's causing mudslides, flooding, and death. This is where it's happening. Near Kelowna, a man and a woman were killed when their home was swept away in a mudslide. North of Kamloops, another mudslide and 2 more deaths. And in the Prince George area, 4 people drowned when their van went off a washed-out bridge. Ian Hannamansing spent the day in the BC interior. Here's his report.
Many longtime residents say they have never seen anything like the wall of mud which crashed through this hillside, destroying buildings, trees, everything that lay in its path. This house was rammed by a mudslide yesterday afternoon. 2 bodies were found buried deep in the wreckage. and searchers spent the day gingerly looking for a third victim, hoping the rest of the hill was now stable. To the north, in the Prince George area, the floods have also hit hard.
We lost, I don't know, 100 yards easily, and then the house and the garage went. It was quite interesting to watch.
So everything you had is gone?
Yeah, we had 8 acres down there that's completely wiped out. There's basically not a tree left standing.
Emergency crews have been struggling to deal with the damage to highways, transmission lines, and bridges where water has softened foundations.
The bridge isn't weakening, but the embankment in the south abutment is certainly in jeopardy.
The floods have also pushed some people out of their homes. Marge Rollheiser and her husband have been sleeping in their camper ever since the water started pouring into their home on the edge of Lake Okanagan.
We've been flooded out 4 times. One night, last Wednesday night, when the water came in, I was so scared that the whole house might float into the Okanagan Lake. I was really scared.
But here at least there is some calm today, and residents hope the sunny weather is a sign that things are going to get better.
There's no problem along here now. We're in pretty good shape.
This welcome change of weather doesn't mean an end to the flood threat. The lake levels are expected to rise for at least another 7 or 8 days, and a long spell of hot, dry weather would cause even more problems, as the snowpack in the mountains would begin to melt. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Kelowna.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver News at 6 host Anita Bathe at 2 amazing events this June. CBC Vancouver is a proud returning media sponsor of the Indian Summer Festival. Get your tickets today. And on June 23rd, Anita will moderate a panel of medical experts at UBC Dialogue Medical Innovations. Where is technology leading us? Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe here once again. Okay, Joe, some excitement in the Georgia Strait this morning. I'll let you tell us about it.
Yeah, you said it, Anita. We had several waterspout sightings this afternoon. Let me take you right to the footage. This is looking from Comox. That is a stunning sight. Again, we had at least 10 different sightings from Comox and Powell River. Always wonder if it's a tornado, a funnel cloud, or a waterspout. If it forms over the water, it is likely a waterspout. And indeed, the Waterspout Research Center confirming that today, adding it to the worldwide database. But look how ominous that shot is. The atmosphere was just right for these kinds of conditions. Now, luckily, no reports of boaters or mariners out on the water at the time, but take a listen to a crew member who was about to set out witness one of these waterspouts.
There was a crazy black cloud above with like a big spindly tornado looking thing coming down towards the ocean, and it was pretty crazy. And it's moving.
Indeed, a big spindly tornado thing. And they can be just as strong as tornadoes if they do encounter any boats over the water. So Environment Canada giving a heads up because of those unsettled conditions today. That low pressure system you can see just sneaking north of Port Hardy, that is the culprit, creating that cold air above warmer ocean water. That is a recipe for instability for us. And speaking of instability, I mentioned the drought conditions in the southern interior. We're seeing thunderstorms in through central parts of the province. Prince George could be looking at 10 to 40 millimeters of isolated downpours with those thunderstorms that are happening tonight, and I've got them again in the forecast for tomorrow. Good rain for most of the province, not looking at anything too heavy other than Prince George northward, but generally it's a good rain as this low pressure system swirls northward. We've got a good amount of sunshine for our Thursday. behind it, though, a Pacific system will make a soggy Friday. And I know we're watching the weekend forecast closely, Anita. I'm going to find us some sunny breaks, and we can also appreciate the sogginess.
Yes, we can do both for sure. Thanks, Joe. Well, you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Dan Burritt is here at 11 o'clock after the National. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.